As a bird watcher, I keep a lot of lists of birds I've seen. I have a life list of all the birds that I've identified since I've become a birder. I keep a list of birds I've seen in different states. But by far, my favorite list I keep is my yard list. This is a list of birds I've seen from my house, my kitchen window, my bedroom window, or just the little patch of grass outside. I've lived at this location in North Boulder for just 2 years, and this week I got a new life bird. I was very excited, walked outside. I didn't see it. Like many birds, I heard it first, this little jumbling sound high up in the cottonwood. And I was very excited because I knew instantly it was going to be a new bird for my list. It was a Townsend solitaire. If you haven't seen a Townsend solitaire, it's probably because they're small, they're gray, but I really find them cute. They have this like striking white eye ring, buffy little wing patches, but you often hear them first. And that's how I found my 54th yard bird this week. And it was something to celebrate. I love yard birding because it makes you appreciate every single common bird. If it's a house finch or a Townsend solitaire, each of them has its own merit, value, and gets you excited. And so every time I'm outside, I'm always looking, listening, kind of gets me grounded and tuned in to where I live. Now, as a birder, I meet a lot of people out there that keep lists that are unique and strange, like birds they've seen from a tiny airplane window or birds they've seen in a baseball park. I've also met birders who have not kept any list whatsoever. They just like to appreciate them, identify them when they see them on the trail or at their bird feeder. And that's really one of the most amazing things about birding. There's no right way to do it or wrong way to do it, especially if it's getting you outside and connected to nature and birds, then you're doing it right if it's bringing you joy. And that's what I'm hoping this podcast does, is opens your eyes to some new birds in your neighborhood or wherever you're looking. Welcome to Voices of Open Space. I'm your host, Eva Lark, and this is our winter episode of Tail Feathers. And I'm very excited today to have a special guest, the one, the only Ted Floyd. Thank you for being here.
Eva, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
We like people to give their own introduction, so I'd like to invite you to tell the folks listening what affiliations you have in the birding world or here locally in Boulder. We're recording this.
Sure. Well, again, I'm Ted, and I'm a lover of birds, and in some ways that's sort of the beginning and the end of it for me. But I do have a number of affiliations because bird watching really is my, I don't want to say it's my entire life, but it's a very large part of my life. It's my avocation. It's also my livelihood. So I am primarily affiliated with the American Birding Association. I am the editor of Birding Magazine. I also do web work and work with the Young Birder programs with the American Birding Association as well. I've also had a long and, in my mind, fruitful collaboration with National Geographic. We've just worked together on 3 field guides, all of which were published in 2025. Here in Boulder County, and I'll say sort of in the metro region in general too, I'm involved with so many organizations, I lose track of all of them. But I have been involved pretty heavily with Colorado field ornithologists and Denver field ornithologists. I've certainly had off and on relationships. I don't mean that in a bad way, just in as much as I sometimes let memberships lapse. But a shout out for sure to the Boulder Bird Club, Boulder County Audubon Society, some of the other really great local and regional groups out here as well. Also, I've really been fortunate to fall in with the group with Lafayette Birds. It's just a civic undertaking. We get together once a month on the first Sunday of each month and go bird watching together. Well, open to anybody. You can bring children and non-birding companions. You can bring dogs and cell phones and bicycles and anything else you want to. And we just have a grand old time on the first Sunday of each month.
And what's the location of that? Does it change or is it one place?
No, it's always what starts at one place. We always start at Greenlee Wildlife Preserve right in Lafayette. It's very conveniently about a 45-second run from my house. So I've just let listeners know where I live. But it's at Greenlee Wildlife Preserve right there in Lafayette. That's pretty near the intersection of Baseline and 287. And we get started at 1 p.m. on the first Sunday of each month.
Great. So if you're in the Front Range area and you're looking for a monthly birding opportunity, then they should check that out.
Yeah, and I'll say it's a great way to meet, 80 to 100 or more of your best birding buds, and also to see an awful lot of really good birds. I know it's sort of just right there in the suburbs, but the Greenlee Wildlife Preserve and the nearby Wanaka Lake and Hecla Pond have a really remarkable diversity of birds all year long.
Well, Ted, I've been a big admirer of you for many years. I think you're definitely, you told us your affiliations, but I think people should know that you're a wonderful author, podcaster, editor of the award-winning magazine. And I first virtually met you in 2008 or 2009. I was a fledgling birder back then, and it was just a virtual email exchange. But the lasting impression was I was introduced to you by some folks at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and they introduced you as this big expert. But the way that you responded was so welcoming and kind and not intimidating. And I've always thought of you as being such a birding ambassador. Has that always been the case?
Well, it's very kind of you to say that. I'll say back at you, but in the sense of the birding community in general, what's just so wonderful to me about bird watching is how, with a few exceptions, of course, but in general, whether one is, a celebrated, veteran of bird watching and ornithology for decades, or whether you're just getting started, none of that really matters. I always get a kick out of how, especially when I'm traveling abroad, I might meet somebody who barely speaks English, and except for a shared love for birds, would probably just be the sort of person I might just walk right by. And you just go bird watching with somebody for 3 or 4 minutes, and it's like you're twins separated at birth who just finally met each other again, and you're just the best of friends. And it sounds like I'm engaging in hyperbole, but I really am not. You just put two bird lovers together, and regardless of everything else in their life, where they came from or what they believe in or who they are, birds bring us together. And I'm sure that that's true, by the way, of other hobbies about which people are passionate. But something about bird watching that's just so inspiring to me is that we just sort of all get together and share our love for birds.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that we like to talk about on this podcast is people's spark bird, or it doesn't have to be a bird per se. It could be just like what got you connected to birds for the first time. Is there something that hooked you?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm certainly aware of the idea of the spark bird. So my short answer is no, there's not a bird, but I do have sort of a two-part story for you there. So I started off as a very young person. I was very much into bird watching by the time I was about 12 years old. And what got me into it was actually sort of a mandate by my mom that I and my siblings keep a daily journal. My mother believed that we were terribly behind in our verbal abilities, and she compelled us. We were essentially forced to keep a daily journal. We were paid a pittance, to be sure. It was $0.25 a week. So do the math, that's about 3 cents per journal entry. And I remember back in like the 4th or 5th grade, just being so disengaged from the process. All of my journal entries basically said, I woke up, ate 3 meals, brushed my teeth, and went to bed. But after a while, I was really getting into it. And I was describing the weather, the garden, the people in the neighborhood, the animals in the neighborhood, and eventually the birds in the neighborhood. And the time came up, and I didn't have to keep the journal anymore. And I told my mom I wanted to keep doing it. And she said, that's fine, but I won't pay you anymore. So I kept writing journals anyhow, and just got more and more into birds. So I actually think that being in this weird sense, like, I don't want to say forced, but strongly compelled to keep a journal really got me to observe the world of birds. However, the animal that really, really started me off on my life list was actually an opossum. We were city people. I grew up in a big city back east, and we were just on a little vacation in Virginia, and I saw an opossum, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. I still think that opossums, by the way, are very, very beautiful, and I totally remember like the date, the time, but I went back home and took out a sheet of paper and wrote down, animal number 1, opossum. And then the next morning I went out and saw a dog and a cat and a cow and a rooster. But the next thing I was, seeing Carolina chickadees and turkey vultures and red-bellied woodpeckers. So that's how I got started, actually. I was already writing things down, and then I saw an opossum, which caused me to write down a list of things I'd seen. And within 2 or 3 days, I was a bird watcher.
Wow. So kind of listing almost got you into birds too, like listing out the animals you saw, listing the birds.
It's funny for you to ask that. I mean, the answer, I guess, is yes, I did keep a list of the animals seen. keep in mind, I was a 12-year-old at the time. And it started off with, again, opossum, rooster, chicken. I might have put human on the list, as a matter of fact. But, you're right. I did have a chronological and numerical, sequence of animals seen, and that eventually became a life list of birds. I wouldn't have used the word life list at the time. I wouldn't have known what it meant. But no, you're right. I did have a list of animals seen. But I also want to point out, though, that was preceded by just journal entries about saw a beautiful cloud, the weather got colder today, the garden's doing well. So it was preceded by more general observations of the natural world.
Well, I'm very lucky that I get to be a mentor with the American Birding Association.
That's right.
Young Birder
Thank you for doing
program
that.
with the field journals module specifically, which is, it sounds like you were really drawn to nature through field journaling. And I think it's such a wonderful practice for people of all ages. Do you still keep a field journal of some sort?
Yes, but it's largely digital these days. And I make no apologies for that. Back in the day, if you go back long enough, they didn't have pen and paper, and they didn't even have writing, and they didn't even have language at one point in the history of our species. So yes, I keep a daily record of what I see. I do it mostly now through checklists with eBird and iNaturalist, or digital media. So I take pictures of photos of birds. I make videos of birds. I make audio recordings of birds. I'm also still a compulsive writer. And if you were, for example, to look at my eBird checklists, you would see the comment field full of notes. And you would see, actually, with most of the species of birds, also notes as well. So I keyboard in content now, and I tap it into my phone also more than I would have in the day. That said, anytime that I'm sort of outside my comfort zone, which is Colorado, I do have a notebook with me, and I do just sort of jot down things. And it's really just as for memory, more than anything else, where I was, what I saw, questions that I had. So I do keep a daily record of everything that I see, and I do that every single day, believe it or not, but it's typically tapping into a phone or typing into a keyboard.
I know I was very lucky. I worked at Hog Island Audubon Camp for close to a decade. It's a residential camp, mostly for adult bird watchers, but they do have weeks for teenagers. And I got to spend a week with your daughter.
You did. I am aware of that.
And one thing that really impressed me about her was her natural curiosity of the world around her. And she was really engaging in that through iNaturalist. For those at home, it's a community science app where you can take photos, and it could be mushrooms, plants, insects, and you're crowdsourcing the identification. It goes into this larger data field that scientists around the world can use. Are you also a iNaturalist, like super user, like your daughter?
I wouldn't call myself a super user. She did get me into it for sure. She had gotten into it sort of shortly before the pandemic when she was in middle school, and then sort of really took it to the next level. Starting in 9th grade, which is when the pandemic started for her. So I've more or less picked that up from her. She's more of, as you said, an iNat super user than I am. But I certainly am an iNaturalist user. I'm a fairly regular contributor, not daily the way that I am with eBird, but pretty often. By the way, since you mentioned my daughter Hannah in connection with Hog Island, going back to journaling, there may be something that runs in the family here. Before she went out there, she made a point of reading one of Scott Weidensall's books, because Scott Weidensall was with you all that year as well. And he noticed something that Hannah was doing, which was marking up a book, and asked what it was. And it turned out it was his book. And he said that he had never seen a book with as much writing in it as that, and certainly not one of his own books with as much writing in it. And last I heard, his phone photo of his of his book with her scrawl, is part of his presentation. So whichever, I know Scott's written a number of marvelous books, but whichever one it was, I guess it was so heavily annotated by my daughter that it's part of the Weidensalliania.
Well, I think the first time I ever met you in person, you were birding with your daughter. How was it being a parent, like with your children, getting them outside? Did you have to drag them along, or were they coming willingly? I'm curious, as a parent of 2 young children, who I take birding often, how's that experience?
It's funny, I didn't expect we would go in this direction, but I actually hold fairly strong opinions in this matter, which I suppose I'll be sharing with you all right now. So I am a huge proponent of starting as early as possible, and I really mean from day 0. You mentioned I have another child, a son, and I won't go into all the details here because they're quite extraordinary. But he and I were birding in a blizzard the day he was born. I mean, you talk about day zero. He was not yet a day old, and we were already out bird watching in a fabled Boulder blizzard from 2006. If you want to go back just a little ways there. So no, I'm a huge fan of getting the kids out as early as possible. You'll have to slow down at times. You do have to change diapers and deal with other exigencies when they do arise. But it's just, I have no regrets about having taken very, very young people with me. And again, I don't mean 5 years old or 2 years old or 2 months old, but just right from the very, very beginning. The youngest of children are just insatiably curious about anything in the world, and I find especially about the natural world as well. So some of my happiest memories really are from the earliest days with Hannah and Andrew when they were not capable of certainly not walking or speaking, but in their way really of being awed by the natural world, and that rubbed off on me as well.
Yeah, I have found it one of the greatest gifts of being a parent is getting to see the world through their eyes. So thanks for sharing that personal antidote with us. As far as your writing, you were mentioning earlier that you've gotten a few books that are come out this past year. Can you tell us a little bit about what they are about?
Well, sure. So the 3 books in 2025 were all very much related to one another. They're 3 National Geographic titles. They're all field guides to the birds, and they are about as straightforward as can be. A field guide to the birds of the eastern U.S. and Canada, a field guide to the birds of the western U.S. and Canada, and a field guide to all of the birds of the United States and Canada. Some of the listeners may know that the National Geographic franchise goes back now well over 40 years. So I was coming in on a very, very well-established let's say a tradition of excellence at National Geographic, but we really attempted to revitalize the series or the franchise as well. So I and the others involved in it made a real effort to write for an audience with 21st century sensibilities, and really we're in the second quarter of the 21st century right now. Where does all the time go? So I very much wrote, and it's not just me. There were a lot of people involved in this book, but for an audience that, by and large, hadn't even been born when the first of these field guides came out in the 1980s. So I'd like to say that the presentation of content is strongly holistic, ecological, that it puts the bird into its natural context. There are, of course, feathers and field marks and technical points within the book, but placing the bird in its environment, and that's not just a scientific, biotic environment. It's also can even be sort of a cultural environment, sort of what a bird might signify for a human in terms of the changing of the seasons or the role that a bird might play in culture.
I know I'm a big fan of eBird, which is, and Merlin, which are both apps, but I also love a field guide. And especially if I'm birding abroad or somewhere else, I have to have that on me. What do you think the value is still in like a actual book field guide for people?
Right. So let's just take a bird that's incredibly common here in Colorado, the American robin. Everybody has access to a robin. So if you go to the Marvelous Birds of the World page for the American robin, it's online, but it runs to the equivalent of dozens of print pages. If you were to print the thing out, it would go on and on and on and on like that. But that's very valuable information about all the molts and plumages, about changes in populations, about some of the very picayune details of anatomy and physiology. But how do you say all of that on a page that also has 4 other species of thrush on it? You get do the math here. What is that? 150 words? I'm not sure. So I think that the huge value of a field guide done right is distilling all of that knowledge sort of into the essence of the bird. I like to think of really good field guide writing as haiku-like. A haiku is this incredibly powerful, almost sometimes like a universal statement, but it's only 3 short lines. Now I had a little bit more than that for the field guide. So the challenge, and it's a major like intellectual and artistic challenge, although it's one that I really very much enjoy, is to say like everything that you can say about the robin in just 8 or 10 or 15 lines of text.
I love that idea of like a field guide being like haiku. I think that's an interesting frame for people to pick up their field guide and look through it. And I do not envy how one would condense the information down.
Yeah, and for somebody who might have access to that field guide and might have access to the Robin account. I don't have it in front of me right here, but I imagine you'll find a combination of fairly technical language in there and probably some more sort of emotional language in there about the robin as well. The experience of seeing a bird like a robin is this wonderful blend of sort of technical and I can't think of a better word than emotional. There's an emotional response and a very sort of scientific response, and it's not right brain, left brain. They're all there once at the same time, and that sort of instantaneous engagement of the bird as both something that we feel powerfully about, but that we can also sort of be more rational or objective about is a real draw to me for bird watching and nature study.
I want to ask you a question about the American Birding Association.
Please do.
So I know you're the editor of the magazine, and you help with the young birder programs. Is there an aspect of the job that you like the most?
Yeah. So let me tell this by way of an anecdote. Okay. Decades ago, I remember reading, actually, I think it was in Birding Magazine, although I may be wrong about this. This was long before I had the job. A survey of bird watchers. And I think the question was something along the lines of like, how many birders have you met in your life? And keep in mind, this would have been in the 1990s. So it's, 30 some years ago now. And the responses were 1 to 5, maybe like 10 to 15, 15 to 50 or more. And there was one contributor who said more than 1,000. And it was Ken Kaufman. And I remember, even though the name was very, very well known to me at the time, thinking, how is that possible? How could somebody possibly have met 1,000 bird watchers? Because in the 90s, they really were fairly rare. Through my work at the ABA, I am certain that I have met 5,000 bird watchers, and probably more than that. The numbers, way into the 4 figures, if not into the 5 figures. So just the opportunity for now, getting on to it, 24 years at the ABA now, just to meet bird people like every single day. So here we are, you and me today. It's going to be more people tomorrow. It was different people yesterday. I meet like in real life, never mind the internet and phone calls and so forth, but like actually in real life, real bird watchers daily. It's just the two of us today. So you're only one person today. But a few days ago, I was in the presence of close to 100 bird watchers. And next weekend, I'll also be in the presence of many bird watchers as well.
Right.
So in answer to your question, it's the ABA more than anything else that has been brought me into contact with so many bird watchers.
I love that. And then even for those listening at home right now, you're touching all their lives. They're listening to our conversation. You also are going on the American Birding Association's podcast.
Right. So I am a frequent guest of the podcast. Nate Swick, based out of North Carolina, is the host, and just a marvelous lineup of guests who actually sort of know what they're doing and are fairly well rehearsed. But I'm the fallen whenever we can't procure somebody or something happens at the last. People get sick, for example, or their schedules change. I'm brought in to do a segment called Random Birds, and it is just as fun as can be. Nate spins a random generator. He punches it into his computer, and bird names come up, and he and I just riff on the bird for anywhere from like 5 to 15 minutes. There's no preparation, no rehearsal. It's completely extemporaneous. I have no idea if the next bird is going to be a vireo or a flycatcher or a loon. He just throws a bird my way, and we randomize it.
Oh, I love that. Well, that kind of segues into our next segment. We do this thing called Meet Your Neighbor, and I randomly pick a bird that's local here in Boulder County, and we talk about it. But I did tell you the bird in advance this time. I said that we were going to talk about the cackling goose. It's a bird that I think maybe people have overlooked. I was on a bird walk recently, and people kept saying, "Oh, there's so many Canada geese. There's so many Canada geese." And I was like, "Oh, those are actually cackling geese." And I realized probably many people do not know the difference, with good reason, right? This is a species that for many, many years were lumped together up until 2004, when cackling geese became a distinct species. For those listening, how would you describe the differences between the two species?
Right. So I'm actually going to, this is maybe bad form, just actually repeat something you just said because it's so central to the story, which is that until 2004, it's an odd thing about birder psychology, but nobody even knew about the cackling goose because it was treated as part of the Canada goose species. But we realized a few years beforehand, but we formalized it in the year 2004 with actually a split of what was then called, it's confusing, the Canada goose was split into two species. One retains the name Canada goose, the other becomes the cackling goose. And cackling geese are fantastically abundant in Boulder County in the winter months. In fact, they outnumber Canada geese considerably during the winter months. I would say that the cackling goose is probably the most conspicuous bird in the county. And also, by the way, in the whole Front Range metro region, really in most of eastern Colorado during the winter months here. So like, how did we never know it? And again, the reason why is because it was, quote unquote, just a Canada goose. So here's the deal. The bird formerly known as the Canada goose, now split into the Canada goose and the cackling goose, they all look the same. In terms of their feathers, they're the very, very familiar, we call them white-cheeked or white-chinned geese. They're the ones with the black necks and then the big white cheek and the brown bodies. But there are major structural and vocal and behavioral and ecological differences. So let's just start quickly with what they look like. So cackling geese are smaller. They are more rotund overall. They have shorter, thicker necks, and they have shorter, stubbier bills. And the Canada goose is the opposite of all that. The Canada goose is a longer, larger bird. It often sort of looks low-slung and maybe pointy. The neck is extremely long, and then the forehead is long and sloping, and the bill is very long and sloping as well. The Canada goose is the fabled, what do you call them, cobra chicken, because they rear their heads back like a cobra and they hiss at you. And then the cackling goose is actually sort of more duck-like in its proportions. So those are some of the differences in appearance. They sound different, too. As you might imagine, the cackling goose has a bit of a cackling sound. It's a little more of a yelp or a scream than a cackle. And the Canada goose has an honest-to-goodness, deep, throaty honk of a goose. So their sounds are different. The behavior, the ecology is really wildly different as well. The cackling goose is a much more migratory species. They breed very, very far north, the Arctic Ocean coastal plain and up onto the Canadian Arctic archipelago. So we call them Arctic geese. They're way, 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 way up there. And then they migrate down south to Colorado and point south as well in the winter months. Their wintering grounds are in the process of a drastic range shift right now. So they formerly wintered much farther south, but for some interesting reasons, and we may or may not get into, they're wintering farther north in Colorado in particular. So they're more migratory, they're smaller, they sound different from the Canada goose.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do just see them all as the same, but in the winter, it is like one of my favorite things to do is drive around the agricultural fields of Boulder County, which we have thousands and thousands of miles of ag fields, and they're often filled with all types of geese, not just cackling geese and Canada geese, but I'm always looking for the unusual goose that's mixed in.
Right. So we have several other possibilities here. There are two brilliantly white geese, the snow goose and the Ross's goose, which are sometimes seen in the county, much, much smaller numbers in the winter months. And then a sort of less common species, the greater white-fronted goose. And then the sort of the rarity for us would be a bird called the brant. It's a smaller all-black goose. Also, just to mix things up, we see hybrid geese. So cackling geese and snow geese sometimes hybridize up on the sort of like the northwest corner of the Hudson Bay and make their way down to Canada, down to Colorado in the winter months. So most of those geese in the geese flocks in winter are going to be cackling geese, and then secondarily Canada geese, and then much less common, those four other species.
I know I was at Lagerman Agricultural Preserve. It's been, the parking lot's been closed for the past 6 months. They've been doing some parking renovations. I'm very excited that it is reopened with better drainage, more accessible parking lots. There's a better turnaround for our horse trailers. And I was lucky to see lots of different geese, including some of those hybrid cackling Ross or snow geese hybrids where the head's all white, but the body just looks like a cackling goose. So if people are out there and you're seeing something unusual, well, it's probably because it's a hybrid and it is unusual. It's a mix and looks kind of like you took the head of one and put it on the body of the other. Right. It literally does look that way. But they're kind of a fun, it's kind of, when you're seeing these literally thousands of geese on a reservoir or in a field, it can be kind of a fun game to look for the one that's standing out.
Sure. I agree that can be a fun game. I also want to point out that if you're thus inclined, it's also valuable for science to document these animals. A photograph posted to to eBird or iNaturalist, or you don't even have to do that, post it to Facebook where an expert will tell you what it is, does valuably document the occurrence of the bird. Most of those goose species are increasing in number. And although that sounds very hopeful, it's not as good as you might think. It has to do with habitat and climate change, among other things. So documenting how these populations are coming into contact with each other and hybridizing and winding up here in Colorado is valuable. I also agree with your earlier point, though, that is just fun to, to add a different element, I guess, to goose identification. Hey, I should also say, both you and I have danced around this, but all of these geese that we're talking about, except for the Canada goose, are here only in the winter months. Right. So from, let's say, April to October, you're basically looking at just the Canada goose. That's the only goose species that's regularly here in Boulder or anywhere in Colorado in the warmer months. It's in the winter when all sorts of challenging geese show up.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a good point to make. And I think a lot of people really pay attention to geese in the summer because they're having their babies and people are attracted to that. So I can also understand where they're just like, oh, all these are Canada geese. But I know I wake up every morning hearing the geese outside my window, and it's usually the last bird I see in the evening. They're kind of soaring around trying to find a place to roost for the night. So I'm glad that we got to talk a little bit about cackling geese. And I invite you guys to go out there, especially on your reservoirs, agricultural lands. I mean, they're everywhere. They're in the middle of your cities and neighborhoods. I think that's the other really approachable thing about geese is they stand fairly close. You can really get to look at these field marks. They're not flying by or small like a songbird that's not going to stay still for you.
To amplify all of that and just say that to the extent that you are inclined, trying to document how many you're seeing is valuable as well. I'm simplifying this story a bit here, but as I said, the numbers are increasing. And bird watchers, more than anybody else, because there's so many of us counting birds, can really help to show how populations are changing, both the numerical increase and also these range shifts and range expansions as well.
Yeah, I think you were mentioning how they historically wintered much farther south, and now we have these warmer winters. Today, recording this, it's a sunny, warm winter day in Colorado with no snow on the ground. When you were doing the field guide, was that something that happened that you noticed that there's a lot of range shift in species? Was that something that was taken into a lot of consideration of like updated maps? And
Sure. So you mean for the cackling goose or for birds
well,
in
for
general?
all birds in general, but
Yes.
also the cackling goose.
Yes. So big, easy question to ask, big question to answer. I'll try to go efficiently here. So the short answer is yes. It is remarkable just how many birds ranges have changed simply since the previous edition of this field guide, let alone the first edition more than 40 years ago. So we collaborated very closely with eBird, which we've mentioned here earlier, and they provided the data-driven range maps that populate the pages of that field guide. And as the range maps would sort of, I don't want to say spew out of the printer because we don't deal with printers anymore, but when I would see the output, my first reaction for some of them was, no, this has to be wrong. But then I realized, no, this is actually right. These birds' ranges are changing so drastically. So a great many birds are occurring farther and farther north. And the winter range of the cackling goose is a good example of that. Climate change is part of it. In the case of the cackling goose, by the way, changes in agricultural practices are driving that northward range expansion as well. So that's at play there as well. But I was struck, and I continue to be struck by just how many birds' ranges have changed so much. On a Boulder County note here, I've lived in the county for about 24 years. Birds like a black-chinned hummingbird just didn't occur here at all when I arrived here. It's the most common breeding hummingbird in the lowlands right now. It's sort of the only common breeding hummingbird in the lowlands. Bush tits were scarce at best, and they're now widespread and common in the eastern part of the county. So those are two birds, again, the black-chinned hummingbird and the bush tit, that have increased and expanded drastically in our area. A bird like the ring-necked pheasant has pretty much disappeared in the 24, 25 years that I've been out here.
We've been talking about some notable hybrids and more rare geese. Some other notable sightings, I think, in the last couple of months. You and I shared participation in the Christmas bird count, the Boulder County Christmas bird count, which was, I think, in its 84th year.
Boulder was.
Boulder.
And then the actual, the overall Christmas count's like 125th or 126th year. That's right.
That's right. And I was really struck how there was 4 new species for the Boulder list, and 3 of them were warblers.
Yeah. So what happened this winter, and it's exciting, but again, there's a little bit of a storm cloud about it, was a large flock of warblers. Well, I should say a diverse flock of warblers along Boulder Creek, right near Boulder High School. It actually, the discovery started out with me back in November. I saw a chestnut-sided warbler back there and sort of just thought of it as a one-off. I should have stayed with the flock because within days, other birders had gone back and refound that bird, but also birds that I didn't see, like a pine warbler and northern parula, and I believe orange crown and maybe something else, and they're yellow rump warblers. And it just kept piling on to Tennessee warbler, and I'm drawing a blank here. There was another, I guess, rare bird in there as well. I think we got like 8 or 9 species of warblers in that flock. So it was really, really exciting to see so many warblers along Boulder Creek in the winter. I was teasing my friends back east that in early December, we were seeing more birds on Boulder Creek in Boulder County than they would be seeing in New York or Pennsylvania on an average day in September. I mean, we were just seeing so many of their warblers. That is, of course, a reflection of the warmer winters, which is a reflection of the broader drying and warming of the climate here in Colorado and everywhere else at our latitude as well. But really remarkable how many of those birds were there. I know that the orange-crowned warbler is still being reported, at least now into February, and the parulas, multiple parulas were there certainly into January, and I think some other birds as well.
Yeah, I think it's important what you mentioned that, when we see these rare birds, they're also telling this other story, a story of climate change or habitat changes. Sometimes birders are often just focused on, it's a rare bird or it's exciting, but these deeper stories that they're telling us about how our world is changing is, I think, so enlightening and just adds another layer to the discovery.
Yeah, and to be positive about that, again, the really powerful position of birdwatchers just to document this. The warblers along the creek are perhaps anecdotal. It's just one flock of warblers in one county in the United States. But if similar things are happening in Utah and Montana and Idaho, and not just in 2025, 2026, but the winter following and the winter after that, patterns really begin to accumulate. And the power of just the power of the people of bird watchers in very massive numbers, carefully documenting what's out there is really contributing to our understanding of changing bird populations.
Yeah, I think things like eBird, which allows anyone to submit their sightings to this larger data set to really show us what is happening. It's bringing together just a huge community of observers and helping us really focus on what areas we should be looking at to protect or what areas we're seeing declines and what that could mean. So I'm a huge fan of eBird, and you've mentioned how you use it. I'm curious, how long have you been eBirding?
So I know the answer to this question. It's do you know the answer to this question too?
I don't know.
Oh, I see. So I started on January 1st, 2007, and I've actually submitted one complete eBird checklist every single day since then. I have by far the longest consecutive days eBird checklist streak on Earth. It's approaching 7,000 days right now. So I have eBirded I've submitted at least one complete checklist every single day for almost 20 years right now, and I have no intention to stop. Over on one of our Young Birder channels at the ABA, the kids have created 2 hashtags. One of them is hashtag when will Ted Floyd die? And the other is hashtag what would it take to kill off Ted Floyd? Because I've been eBirding consecutive days, literally longer than any of them have been alive. So I guess that qualifies me as a compulsive eBird user. I do want to say, though, that sure, it's fun. It's to some extent a game. But keep in mind, and I tell myself this every single day too, that we're contributing something that goes way beyond a number, or personal gratification. I have nothing against personal gratification when it comes to birds. We should go out and have a good time watching birds. But I do take care to go back through my notes and make sure I got it right. I am extremely adept at accidentally typing in white-winged dove when I went mourning dove. Or unfortunately, the checklist for Greenlee Preserve at this time of the year has American dipper and European starling next to them. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've accidentally typed in American dipper when I meant European starling. So to everybody out there, I very much encourage you to use eBird, but also to just check your work. I make many, many, many mistakes, and I imagine we all do as well.
I think that's actually one of the interesting things about birdwatching as a hobby, because it doesn't matter if you are this expert decades-long birder or you're the beginner, we all make mistakes, and we often own those mistakes. Like, oh, yeah, that is just a leaf. Never mind, don't. And I kind of think that in this society where we value perfectionism and everything's right, that it's interesting that we have this hobby where we all are able to say, oh no, I think I was wrong. Even going back to like the way I met you in this email exchange was kind of one of these situations. And it's, yeah, I just think it's maybe unusual.
I totally agree. To me, that's maybe the most gratifying thing of all about bird watchers. Well, actually, I think the most gratifying of all is that they're generally nice to each other and want to share with each other. But right up there with that is they use the word perfectionism. And I mean, I know what you mean, but I have a more positive spin on it. I think that birders are really committed to the truth, to facts and data and evidence. You know, it's funny. I can think of bird watchers who aren't very much like me in terms of what drives them, what motivates them, what inspires them. But they're just as committed as I am or you are or anybody else to getting it right. And especially in today's climate, by which I mean human cultural climate, with a lot of people sort of openly questioning whether truth and data and facts and evidence are really even out there. It's gratifying to me that bird watchers really make an effort to get it right. Of course, we all make mistakes. I absolutely and completely get that. I'm really struck by how a bird watcher who makes a mistake almost always fesses up to it. And yes, it might be annoying to be called out like, "Oh, come on, Ted, that's not a sharp-shinned hawk. That's an American kestrel." But you know, actually, at the end of the day, though, we appreciate the truth, the data, the facts, the evidence, and that's a wonderful thing to me about bird watchers.
Yeah, or we even admire each other for like owning the mistake. I think that's something that I'm like, wow, they can also admit that was wrong, or confess up to it.
And let me also say, it's funny, we're using words like mistake and confess and so forth. I just want to talk about just the commitment to getting it right. Mm-hmm. I'm really struck by that. How if a little bird just flies by past us right here, both you and I we'd want to get a second look. Yeah. We'd want to get a careful look. We'd want to, I'd say, Eva, are you sure of that? And you'd say, yeah, I saw the white in the tail. And I might say, did you catch the white in the eye? And you might say, yes, I did. Yeah, we really, really are committed to, I think, getting it right.
Yeah. And that's another thing I really love about birding as a hobby is that kind of sharing the identification together, sharing this moment together, and kind of turning off the other things where you're like really just focused on something together.
You mentioned the Boulder Christmas bird count a little bit earlier, and something that was, again, powerful and gratifying to me about the group that I was with was we were just from all over the place, and demographically speaking, I think I was probably the oldest person with our group, but we had really expert bird watchers, and one fellow who had just started that day as a bird watcher, and people just coming from very professional and scientific versus more sort of avocational and hobbyist approaches to bird watching. And we're just all in it together to try to count birds as accurately as possible.
Well, we mentioned Loggerman, we mentioned Boulder Creek. Are there any other favorite winter birding spots here in Boulder County that you would suggest for folks listening?
So in the winter months, Boulder Creek is wonderful. It doesn't just have to be along the campus, right downtown, a little bit downstream. So the Walden Sawhill Ponds area is a great place for bird watching. I always like to get up into the high country at least once or twice, maybe 4 or 5 times during the winter months. The number of birds up there are fewer, but it's just so special to have almost guaranteed encounters with birds like pine grosbeaks and Canada jays and Clark's nutcrackers, some of the really iconic birds of the Rocky Mountains. So I love to get up way high when I can during the winter months. And then anytime that there's open water at big reservoirs, especially in colder weather, maybe there's like an ice shelf for the gulls and other birds to sit on. A Loggerman is good in the winter and brilliant in the spring and fall. It's one of the best hotspots in the region in the spring and fall. Also in the winter months, I'll just make an appeal to anybody who lives near a park with trees with berries, bird feeders. A lot of birds will concentrate at those as well. Don't imagine either that you have to get far from your home. I just love watching the ravens flying around 28th and Pearl Street in downtown Boulder. So there's a lot of neat stuff to be seen right in town as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I go grocery shopping is when I see the most gulls during the week. And people often with me, I'm pointing them out. They're like, "Oh, why are they here?" But there are birds truly everywhere.
There really are. Right before I came up here, I just made a very, very quick sort of late lunch walk out to Greenlee Preserve right by my house, and there was a commotion with the cackling geese, going back to that earlier, all getting up. I looked up expecting to see a bald eagle, and it was a golden eagle, a bird that's actually quite uncommon in the winter in the east part of the county. They're out there, but we just don't see them very often. I was just thinking, here I am, some guy out on his lunch break, barely paying attention to birds, and the golden eagle, which is one of the most regal and glorious of all birds in the world, perhaps, was just soaring over my head. So there are birds everywhere.
Yeah, I really love the raptors in wintertime. At Boulder County Parks and Open Space, we have a raptor trip that you can go on. It's free. We have them most weekends. You can sign up on our website, and we take you around to these little places like Loggerman is usually where we start. And then we just go around these agricultural fields, and we're looking for golden eagles, bald eagles, ferruginous hawks, rough-legged hawks. There's just so much diversity in the wintertime with hawks. So I definitely encourage people, similar to your bird walk that you have in Lafayette, it's a great place to find friends, to share birds together. And I think that's one of the nice things about birds is bringing people together.
I might get my knuckles wrapped for saying this. I'm going to go a little bit outside the county and say that an area I just encourage everybody to go to because it's so close to Boulder is Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge right outside Denver. It's a full-on, legit, real national wildlife refuge, but it's one of the really magical urban national wildlife refuges. And in winter, no guarantees in this birding life, but nearly guaranteed to see a ferruginous hawk, like you mentioned, perhaps rough-legged hawk. Often the falcons, merlin or prairie falcon. It's just door to door. If I avoid traffic on 270, it's just a half hour from my house in the southeastern part of Boulder County.
I think that's a great suggestion. I usually try to go there at least once a winter, and it's convenient if you need to pick someone up from the airport or drop someone off. I usually tack that little trip on one side or the other. It's also a great place to take out-of-town visitors because they'll see not only bird life but animal life that they may associate with Colorado in this classic way.
Yeah, it's a real sort of taste of the prairie out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope that you get people on the bird walk that have listened to the podcast. I want to mention one thing coming up in the spring, which is World Migratory Bird Day. That'll be happening the second Saturday in May. There's a whole host of events happening across Boulder County. I know that we will have, with the Environment for the Americas, a World Migratory Bird Day festival out at Walden Ponds, but there'll be bird walks throughout the weekend. I'm doing a birding big sit at Loggerman Ag Preserve for those who want. We usually get, for that May sit, 50 plus species. Like you said earlier, it's just a excellent place for shorebird migration. And in the spring, you just get a diversity of birds. Do you have any other upcoming birding outings or things people get involved with?
Let me actually go back to the Loggerman Big Sit. This will sound odd, but I think you and others will know where I'm coming from here. What you, of course, really, really want at Loggerman at that time of the year is bad weather. Loggerman Reservoir is probably more than anywhere else in Boulder and almost as much so as anywhere in Colorado, just legendarily associated with fallouts of rare birds in bad weather. So if you can schedule a nice upslope storm with rain and snow and sleet and east winds, you'll have every birder in the county joining you because that's the weather that brings in rare terns and godwits and even rarer birds to the parking lot, the land birds, but of course the water birds out on that west side as well. So good luck with that. If the weather's really bad, I might be joining you for the big sit. In terms of upcoming events, well, we've already talked about Lafayette Birds, and I think that's the one I'll sort of primarily emphasize here. And since it's been a little while since we laid out the specs there against the first Sunday of each month. So if I'm doing my math right, because there's not a leap year this year, I think that would be Sunday, March 1st at 1 p.m. And even if I have that March 1st part wrong, it's definitely the first Sunday of March at 1 p.m. And truly all are welcome. It's a really, really cool mix of famous bird watchers whose names you might know and folks who are just absolutely brand new to bird watching. And you don't have to bring anything. You don't need binoculars. You don't need a scope. I would bring a phone if you have it, because you can get neat pictures of birds with your phone. But we break into 3 or 4 or 5, sometimes 6 groups if we have a really large turnout. And we just sort of crisscross the preserve and the nearby Wanaka Lake. We usually get out. Some of the groups get out to Hecla Pond as well. But by March, some migrants will be coming in for sure. And I imagine we'll see great birds, and I guarantee you good company.
Well, I want to say on behalf of Boulder County Parks and Open Space, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I hope that our listeners at home have enjoyed learning more about birds, bird watching, about you, that they check out your latest field guides, join you on a bird walk, and thanks again for being a part of this.
Thanks again for having me, Eva, and to everybody else out there, I'll see you in the field.
Everyone, you can find our programs at discover.bouldercounty.gov, and a special thanks to Longmont Public Media.